Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Blair Forlaw, and I'm so happy to see you all here for this, the final program in a 5-part series, Faith, Freedom, and Action in Troubled Times. We have a very interesting agenda for you this afternoon. I feel sure that you're going to enjoy it. This program is presented by the Religious Freedom Center of the Freedom Forum, and we are grateful for the generous support of the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, which has enabled us to put together this series and present it to you. Now, our work at the Freedom Forum is grounded in the First Amendment to the Constitution. First Amendment, as you know, I'm sure, assures each and every one of us 5 fundamental freedoms. Those of us who are here at the Freedom Forum believe that these fundamental freedoms are part of what makes the United States one of the most vibrant democracies in the world. Our objective with this 5-part series, Faith, Freedom, and Action, is to explore how that first freedom, freedom of religion, and in particular, our freedom to exercise and express our religion, has motivated and sustained action in troubled times in our country's history. And in doing so, we hope to promote religious literacy and understanding across different religious groups. In this series, we have focused in a series of 5 programs on a number of historical stories. We went all the way back to the year 1721 and considered the impact of the smallpox epidemic there on people in Boston. We looked at yellow fever in 1793. We took a number of different approaches to the influenza pandemic in 1918, and we also took some serious consideration of what happened in the early days of the HIV/AIDS pandemic here in the United States. In today's program, our final program, will come full forward to 2020, and we're focused on the COVID-19 pandemic. There's lots of hearts, hands at work in COVID-19 to help to do unto others as our religion would direct us to do. But today we're going to take a specific look on faith in action by and with Native Americans and Muslims. We have 2 outstanding presenters for you today. Each one of them is going to speak for about 15 to 18 minutes. During the time that they're making their presentation, we're going to keep everybody on mute just so that they will have free flow of information and we won't interrupt them. But there will be an opportunity for anyone who'd like to make a comment or pose a question to do so in the chat function at the end of our program. So our first presenter is Reverend Michael Carson, who I'm happy to present to you now. Reverend Carson is the Assistant Director of Native American Affairs for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Secretariat for Cultural Diversity in the Church. Reverend Carson, I'd love to see your business card. It must be this big. I don't know how you get all of that on it, but that's a very important role, and we're so happy to have you. Reverend Carson has a Master of Divinity degree from the Franciscan School of Theology, as well as a Master of Educational Administration degree from Santa Clara University. He served as a pastor in several California parishes. He's been a volunteer with the Navajo Nation in New Mexico. He serves Native Americans in Alaska, South Dakota, and other places. He's going to tell you a lot about that. Reverend Carson also writes and speaks on Native American culture. His biography is much longer than this, but I've asked him to share with us today not only his work, but his own personal spiritual journey and how that has shaped and driven his work. So I'll let him fill in whatever blanks I may have left. Reverend Carson, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you very much. How I get all that on my business card is I abbreviate, so I don't put all those long words. Well, from my own personal story, I'm a Catholic priest, originally from San Jose, from Diocese San Jose. And as I said, I got my theology from Berkeley, California. I've been doing a lot of work with the Native Americans, but also with restorative justice So I've been, when I was in San Jose, I was working with prisoners on death row. I was a volunteer chaplain of a juvenile hall. I worked a lot with the kids at risk with mentoring programs. So it was great work and I enjoy that. Now I was happy being a pastor in San Jose when I got a good call from Father Dan Cassis, who's a priest at the Diocese of Gallup, who's a large part of the Navajo Nation. And he wanted to help because he was the only priest. He had 3 churches and 2 parishes. So I got to help him during summertime. So I worked there for some 8 years. I really enjoyed the Navajo culture and the experience of working with the Navajo. My background is my grandfather was Choctaw. And from him, even growing up, I learned a great appreciation for the Native American culture and Native American spirituality. So that's basically my vocation story. And then while I was working with them, I also got a call asking me if I wanted this position with the USCCB, United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. So what we do have at the USCCB, we have is a subcommittee of bishops who work with Native Americans, and they set policy for everything dealing with Native Americans and Alaska Natives. So I'm kind of their staff person. So I do any research that they want researched. I also am a go-between between the Catholic Native American organizations and the bishops, making sure their concerns are voiced. And also from the bishops who have concern with Native Americans, Alaska Natives, I make sure that all the groups associated with Native Americans, Alaska Natives, hear from the bishops. And we meet as a subcommittee, meet twice a year. So I do the agenda and I help them with the minutes and again, any concerns that they have. My life actually has been pretty busy because we've hit 2 major issues. First, for the COVID-19 crisis. For those who know, Native Americans have been hit hard by the COVID-19 crisis. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is Native Americans are some of the poorest people in the nation for a variety of reasons. But when I talk about Native Americans throughout the country, people are surprised that some don't have running water, some don't have electricity, and they're pretty well isolated. And they have small houses, and they have many generations living in the same house, which causes a fertile ground for COVID-19, especially not having the running water, not being able to wash up. And also their medical care is not the best. And there's also concerned sovereignty issues too, dealing with the federal government and the state government in terms of direction and how they can cope with or respond to COVID-19. So that's been quite a good crisis. There's been concerns across my desk of how to deal about it. There's also secondary concerns that you might not to think about. Native Americans, Alaska Natives in the US have the highest suicide rate of any culture family, more than African Americans, Asians, Hispanics. And this, when people are isolated, of course, the depression comes to the forefront. And suicide rate, even worse as it is, it gets incredibly bad. So we have a group of Catholic medical health experts or experts in Native American, Alaska American culture. And they've been helping us out on how to respond to the uptick of Native American suicide, especially for the young, trying to take a Native American suicide right off the table so they're not considerate about that, and working with Catholic schools so that happens. Another thing, what was asked of me was to talk about some of the people that I work with who have incredible faith sense and are doing excellent work. The first concern, the first quality of people that I work with are those in Catholic schools on reservations. I've been blessed being with them, that they have incredible faith sense as motivation to help the kids that they have from the poorest of the poor get not only a great education, so they go on to college and universities, but also to make sure that they know their language. I've been with schools, especially high schools, and they teach language in every single grade of their school, native languages. So native languages are not forgotten, they're embraced, and the kids going through the schools know about not only language, but also their culture. Studies have shown that anybody, especially Native Americans, are grounded in their culture. They do a lot better in terms of not only school, but in terms of life. So it's a foundation based on them of how to celebrate not only their culture, but also their language. I've also been around people across the nation who are working in very difficult circumstances, priests, deacons, religious brothers, religious sisters, and laity. And they're working in places that are isolated and away from people, but they have, again, that great faith sense that keeps them motivated to help them out. I remember last year when I was working with a Jesuit from Alaska, who was on the west side of Alaska, and this was during winter time. And after the meeting was over, I just asked him, just as casual, so what is the temperature outside? He said, it's a balmy 130 degrees below zero. He might have been joking, but I said, wow, I'm glad I'm working in Washington, D.C. I don't have to go outside and think about being frostbitten or hypothermia or anything like that. But my heart goes out with him because he does that every single day, at least during the wintertime. And in order to get to his parishes, he doesn't have a car. He has a plane, and he uses his plane to get to his various parishes throughout the Western Alaska. So my heart goes out to him as being a missionary to be with them and also to be with the people that he serves. That's not only a faith sense, but it's also all the important things that go into helping the poor, especially with Catholic Charities. The idea that we're going to help with hunger and hunger issues. We're going to help with basic communication issues, especially internet issues. One of the concerns I have, especially with being in Washington, D.C., that I have this great internet service, I have all this high technology. But when you get into a reservation, especially isolated communities, they don't have that. In fact, in order to get to a meeting, they have to drive some 60 miles to a church or to a place where they do have internet service. So I try to help them with that and try to organize meetings so they can group together so they can come together. But it's an awesome ministry and I enjoy it a lot. And I feel, again, that I'm where God wants me to be. So any questions?
Well, what we'll do is ask people to jot down their questions and bring them to you at the end, if that's okay, Reverend Carson. But having said that, I'd like to ask you a question quickly, and that is, I had never thought about suicide as being a real problem to the extent that you have described it. Can you tell us a little more about how COVID-19 has compounded with that mental health issue?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's about isolation. It's about a lot of villages are isolated themselves, but also because the reservations are dealing with severe poverty, that there's no jobs and employment in reservations. So the young have to leave, even if they're well educated, they have to leave reservations and go to the big cities. Most Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, are in big cities and not in reservations. So we have the first generation in big cities earning enough money, but then they can't come home because of travel restrictions and other things. Some reservations are closed off. So that compounds their isolation and compounds their loneliness. Mm. Also, there's a concern of both alcohol and drug abuse that we are trying as the Catholic Church to remedy. And the other concern that people are dealing with, it adds to suicide and adds also to problems, is the idea of racism and self-image. That Native Americans, some Native Americans through media and others, have a very poor self-image, and that image is compounded, especially through racism. So we have, in our Catholic Church, we have a recent document called Open Wide Our Hearts that tries to deal with racism, not only with African Americans, but especially with Native Americans, how to counter that image and make sure that Native Americans have a high self-image so they can counter that racism and racism ideal.
Well, thank you. We'll come back to that topic again at the end of our program. Thank you very much. And again, if you have questions or comments for Reverend Carson, please make sure that you bring them to his attention at the end of our program. So now we're going to go on to our next presenter, who is Azhar Azeez. Also has a long title, but not quite as long as Reverend Carson's. He is the Vice President of Community Affairs and Alliances with Islamic Relief USA. Azhar Azeez has a bachelor's degree from Osmania University. That's in India, am I right? He also has an MBA degree, and he's currently working on his PhD in Islamic studies. He's held several leadership positions with the Islamic Society of North America, including 2 terms as vice president and 2 terms as president. He travels the nation and the world to bring Islamic Relief's mission and values to light in the humanitarian field. And I know he's going to talk to us a little bit more about his travels and also about the mission and values of Islamic Relief. But as background and to sort of set the stage for Azhar Azeez's comments, we're going to share with you a short video that highlights faith in action on the part of Dr. Saud Anwar, who is a physician and also a state senator in Connecticut. So we'll show you that video, and when it's done, our next presenter will begin his remarks.
Good. Hello, this is Dr. Saud Anwar. We actually want to show you how you can actually use one ventilator to actually give breathing capacity and help to not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but actually 7 people. And we can go up to 8 if we need to, but we wanted to show you at least with 7. And we've been working collaboratively together as a group of people who have from different backgrounds come together. I want to introduce you to Bob. Bob, tell me what you've been up to.
Hi, my name is Robert Connolly. I'm the owner of Interactive CAD Solutions. Less than 4 days ago, I got contacted by email if I could help out with coming up with a method of applying 4 hoses from one village to 4 people. First thing I got was a hose from a anesthesiologist, and we did our first trials yesterday. Came out with mixed reviews. We had problems with the ventilators interfering. So I came back, I redesigned it yesterday morning. I sent the files to Kevin Dyer at Intercode Models. He 3D printed this CAD model overnight and supplied it this morning. It's very simple. It has 4 filters with a coupling that goes directly to the ventilator. There were no issues with interference between the round filter or the square ones.
So with this concept, what we've been able to do is this actually goes inside the inhalation as well as the exhalation part of the ventilator. And then these are the filters which can come together. This actually has 4 options. So the patient can actually, we can have 4 connectors with one ventilator, and each connector can further be divided into 2 or more branches if you need to. Here we have Marvin. Marvin is a respiratory therapist, my star. You've seen him before do the good work. And what we've been able to do is a few things. I'll take this over here and I'll show you some of the things. So this is the inhalation part of the ventilator, and the ventilators we are using are the Puritan Bennett 840 ventilator system, and we actually have that same thing connected on the inhalation part. This is actually now, if you look, we have the 4 branches, and one of those we actually have put a T-piece and then divided it into 2 pieces, and then those each 2 of them are divided into 2 more. So this one outlet is equal to 4, and then 5, 6, 7 patients are connected to this. And then on the exhalation part, again, the similar thing, we have a different color for this so that we can separate them out. This is again the filters that we have placed in. Again, you're seeing the T-pieces that we have connected with 2 extra ones and 2 on this side. And then we move forward and then see that there are 3 others that are connected to this. So when you look at step back, you see all of these different tubes, which are truly confusing, but actually there is a method to this madness. And that method is allowing for us to be able to currently ventilate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 6, and 7 patients. And we could potentially get another one and more so if we needed to. And here's the way to do this. What we have done is, and this is for the pressure control mode, and the inspiratory pressure we have kept at 25. With the inspiratory pressure of 25, we are actually getting a tidal volume of 3,241. Now that number scares you, but you have to divide that by 7 and it comes down to 470 or 450 something, which is exactly what you would want on these patients. So inspiratory pressure of 25 that you set up, and then we're obviously using 21% because we don't want to waste the oxygen in the hospital. And we put a PEEP of 10 and we can go up on the PEEP more so. But each one of these patients are getting a volume based on the exact settings that we have set up, and we are using the pressure control ventilator. And with this mindset, with this strategy, we can actually do ventilation for 7 at this time, but far more. You want to add more?
Nope, that is it. It's just a concept that works in a simulation, and if it comes down to mass casualties, this is a concept that I believe can be tried in the field if need be to have a clinical trial. Good. Concept works.
Now, one more thing I'll just add right now is that we actually did another thing where we were able to lengthen the tubes far more. And even when we lengthened the tubes, we actually did a pressure check on those. And with 20 feet of the tube, the pressure, the volumes were not impacted. So which is pretty fascinating that you can actually have a single ventilator which can go to different places and we would be able to take care of the patient. So with this, I want to share with you later. If anybody has any questions, they can email us. Bob has been kind enough to be able to send us all the details of how to make these devices to make life simple for everyone. And please, if you have any questions, reach out to us and we should be able to help you save more lives.
I have one thing to follow. The files to be 3D printed are open source, so anybody that emails me at bob@intcadsol.com can have a free model for 3D printing.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
Pretty amazing. Azhar, help us understand how this is faith in action.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate the opportunity. It's such a delight to be with Reverend Michael Carson. Thank you so much for your important work and for your, very inspiring words. I want to thank my good friend Blair Forlow and the Freedom Forum for giving me this opportunity. I'm reminded of this very famous quote where we are reminded people should be blessed in life with friends who are both mirrors and shadows. Mirrors don't lie and shadows never leave. So it's truly a blessing to live in a nation where there is so much of collaborative work, especially with the interreligious community. And it's truly a blessing to have this in our nation. So that was an amazing video. Thank you so much, Blair, for sharing this with us. And I really want to begin by taking this opportunity to also thank everyone who is serving in the front lines, especially doctors, nurses, medical practitioners, people who are in the law enforcement, people who are considered as individuals providing essential services to the community. So a big shout out to all those who are in the front line. And we have to also acknowledge that not only these individuals have made supreme sacrifices, but they have their families too were part of these sacrifices. So we truly want to applaud them for their sacrifices and for their work. Dr. Saud Anwar, who is a Connecticut State Senator and a medical doctor, has done remarkable work. And his invention has really will help our fellow citizens. Keep in mind that it is sad that almost 25% of the deaths that happen due to COVID-19 around the world are in US, and the number of positive cases also is much higher. As of yesterday, I believe 115,000 people are dead because of COVID-19. And almost 2.05 million are affected with this pandemic. So our prayers are with everyone who has been impacted with this pandemic. Dr. Saud Anwar is taking on the novel coronavirus on multiple fronts. both as a resident, as a state senator, and most importantly, as a doctor. He happens to be in public and policy arena, and also, serving as a pulmonary specialist in US. This American doctor of Pakistani heritage, he says that he's truly blessed to be in a position to serve as the entire world contends with the novel coronavirus, which has infected so many in US and around the world. He has won many praises from his community and from his fraternity on his invention for this multi-pronged efforts, including, creating this ventilator device that makes it possible for many patients to be treated at once in partnership with his two amazing friends. So together, they have collaborated, and they have provided this huge solution to the challenge that we all were facing in our nation. While most people who contract the novel coronavirus do not need a ventilator, but for those who do, the machine will help people breathe and can be a life-saving. And as the number of cases in US increases by day from across the nation, there is a need that exists, and I hope that his innovation will help them tremendously. Dr. Saud Anwar is not only, and his partners, of course, Robert Coloni and Kevin Dyer, they are all a symbol of pride for all of us. Definitely, when we look at Dr. Saud Anwar, almost 7 million American Muslims, applaud him for his work and for what he has been doing. This team of three has developed a simple splitter, a device that can be used on ventilator to create multiple branches so that several patients can be hooked up to the machine at once. And this is what Dr. Anwar has to say. He said that he shared the information about this ventilator device on his personal Facebook, and he included a video demonstration of how the part works. And the team also made a design information available for anyone to download. And as a result, in more than 100 countries, including many nations in Africa, were able to download it. So the work that he has done is not only helping our fellow citizens over here, but it is having a positive impact around the world, and this is something that really needs to be applauded. Dr. Anwar, he said it in one of his interviews that his hope is that somewhere in the world, as this crisis continues to unfold, that this design will be able to help someone somewhere who doesn't have the access to all the technology that we are so blessed to have here in the US. Recently, the residents in Connecticut threw an unsung heroes parade for this Pakistani American doctor and state senator who created this ventilator with the help of his friends, two other friends, and they took out a drive-through car rally in front of his home, and he was in tears to see this gesture from his fellow citizens. As the cars drove past Mr. Anwar's home and thanked him for his work. And they had signs that says, "Thank you for all your heroism." And this was definitely a proud moment for him and his entire family. And of course, for his partners who collaborated with him on such an important, innovation. If people have equated the current COVID pandemic with war, this is something that was written in one of the articles, then the healthcare workers, the physicians, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, and nurses, aides, these are all individuals who are in the front line. They are frontline warriors, and they need their protection, and they need their support, and they need an investment to make sure that they are well taken care of all over the world, because between this invisible illness and the protection of our society, it is just one force of healthcare workers standing there. So once again, we salute them. We express our deepest gratitude to all those who are in front line. I also want to share with you what Islamic Relief as a humanitarian organization has been doing. They have served close to 400,000 people since the beginning of this pandemic in last 3 months. They have been serving in 30 countries, providing hygiene kits and PPEs and assisting them. Over here in the US, they have provided close to 50,000 masks to different hospitals in partnership with the Islamic Medical Association of North America, which is a group of medical doctors and medical professionals, and with some other NGOs. They have already covered 30 states out of 50 states where they have distributed food packets, food boxes, hygiene kits, and they have been on a regular basis assisting those individuals who are in need. They have so far distributed 50,000 pounds of food, and they have supported pantries, food pantries in all these states. They have spent close to $500,000 in providing financial assistance to those who are going through difficulties and those who are going through financial hardships. And they have been on constant basis, especially in this month of Ramadan that just finished a few days back. They ran a nationwide campaign where they not only provided education and the need that exists, but they were also able to raise money for food boxes, hygiene kits, COVID PPE, and they were able to assist those who are in need. You can find a lot of information about their important work by visiting irusa.org. I just want to share, one quick comment after listening to our esteemed Reverend. Just 10 days back, Islamic Relief was able to send 30,000 bottles of drinking water in 2 trucks to Navajo Nation because we were informed by one of the state rep, Mr. Abbas Akil and his family, that there is a huge shortage and scarcity of drinking water that is being faced by this Native Indian tribe at Navajo Nation. So from Fort Worth, Texas, we were able to send these 2 trucks with 30,000 bottles of water. And the mayor of Albuquerque, the city council of Albuquerque recently recognized the important work of Islamic Relief USA. And it is very sad and unfortunate that a good number of the people of Navajo Nation are also facing COVID-19, and they were affected and impacted by this pandemic. So there is an urgent need of medical assistance that also exists over there, and we are looking for other opportunities to assist members of this tribe. So there is so much of goodness that's going around us, and a lot of individuals are working very hard to assist these individuals in need. Also, I want to say that there was a national Muslim task force that was created, and Islamic Relief USA and the Islamic Society of North America and the Islamic Medical Association of North America and American Muslim health professionals and some others, they got together and they initiated this task force. And today, more than 40 national Muslim organizations are part of this task force. This task force has now become the voice of American Muslims. They have been engaging at all levels. They have been attending, workshops and conference calls that is being hosted by different branches of the administration. And one of the important work that they have done is that in collaboration with the clergy, especially with the Islamic scholars from the Fiqh Council of North America, they were able to educate the community at large, and they ensured that all the mosques remain closed in this last 3 months. Especially, it was very challenging and difficult to keep the mosque closed in the month of Ramadan. That is the time when there is a lot of communal activity where people go to the mosque and they offer prayers for the full month, and they break their fast, and there are so many interactions. But because of the role that this task force played, none of those activities were happening in any of these mosques. There was a constant reminders that was being sent out on social distancing, and all the mosques, and it gives me great pleasure to share this with you, that all the mosques remained closed, especially in the month of Ramadan. And this was unprecedented. This was something that none from my generation or the generation before us was able to witness. It was difficult, but because of our engagement and constant communication, and we hosted dozens of webinars and workshops to educate people and explain to them the importance of staying home, staying safe, maintaining social distancing, following the directives of the city, county, and state authorities. So we were able to successfully ensure that our places of worship were closed in this entire month of Ramadan. So with that being said, I would yield the floor back to you, Blair.
Thank you so much. This is really an amazing effort. It's hard to even take it all in. I wonder, because some of our participants today really are not perhaps familiar with Islam and the principles of Islam. And I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about how this kind of humanitarian effort, which is so significant, is driven by principles of Islam.
Thank you so much. So in the glorious Quran, God Almighty has explained to us on multiple occasions to serve those who are in need and to give charity. 150 times God Almighty has reminded us in the glorious Quran, asking us to spend in the path of God and help those who are in need. It is extremely important that that the religion of Islam pays special emphasis and talks about social responsibility and helping those who are in need. The Quran has a great deal to offer by way of ethical mandatory commands and practical guidelines, whether one is a business person or an individual with wealth or without wealth, or if someone is a customer or a beneficiary. Islam emphasizes to help those who are in need. For instance, paying the zakat, which is an mandatory alms or charity, is one of the 5 fundamentals of the foundation of Islam, whose responsibility, whose social responsibility implications are immense. In the 3rd chapter of the Quran, there is a warning to those who hoard wealth. The concept of social responsibility and justice in Islam is rooted in God's divine nature. The Quran states, verily God does not even do an atom of weight of injustice, mentioned in chapter 4, verse number 40. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, quotes God as saying, "O my servants, I have forbidden upon injustice upon myself and have made it forbidden amongst you, so do not commit injustice." So Quran emphasizes a lot to help those who are in need, to stand with those who are oppressed. The 5 pillars of Islam is to believe in one God and believe in Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the final messenger, and believe in all the prophets, starting from Adam to Noah to Abraham to Moses to Jesus, to every single prophet, to David, every single prophet as messengers and as prophets of God. They pray 5 times a day. They fast in the month of Ramadan, and this year it was from April 24th to May 24th. So for an entire month, they don't eat or drink from dawn to dusk. So they break their fast after sunset, and so they fast for an entire month. And then they give charity. Every Muslim is obligated to give 2.5% of the savings that they have on their wealth, on their property. They have to give this to those who are in need. And of course, whoever financially and physically is able to go and perform a pilgrimage, they are obligated to go and perform Hajj, which is called as a sacred pilgrimage, where they go to Mecca and they perform Hajj. So these are the 5 pillars of Islam. And of course, Islam emphasizes on many other important things. It recognizes the diversity of ethnicities that exists in our society. It talks about how to engage with other faith communities. And there are many examples from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and there are special passages in the Quran that talks about this. It also talks about the distribution of wealth, doing justice, and making sure that help those who are in need. It also, as I mentioned earlier, standing with those who are marginalized. And it also has a very special emphasis on women's rights. So these are few important things that we as Muslims are obligated to execute as part of our faith and as part of our social responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And this is a good segue, I think, to one other question I would like to ask you, and also Reverend Carson. You know, I've heard it said by a number of observers lately that they believe our country is at a real turning point. They're referring, of course, to the devastation of COVID-19, but they're also referring oftentimes to the devastation caused by recent events which have really painfully brought the deep wounds of racism to the forefront in American culture. And I would be interested to hear from each of you as people of deep religious faith. Do you think our country is at a turning point? And if so, what do you see as being on the other side of our transformation? Reverend Carson, can we start with you?
Sure. It's a complicated question. I would say whether we're at a turning point, it depends on our faith communities. That it's up to us to work with the rest of society and to turn and transform the society to more in line with our faith goals and our faith ideals. So it's really up to us. It's been said that there's no great change in American society that wasn't started by a small group of firm believers in faith. So it's up to us in terms of our faith community to move our country into where we need it to be. And that also goes to our church and even the Roman Catholic Church, that in our turning point, it's more listening to, and I can only speak because my field here is the Native Americans. One of the turning points we have in our Catholic Church is the idea of listening. When I first got my job, the Catholic Native American leaders said very clearly to me, they follow Mike, not another program. That means that they do not want a program designed in Washington by the bishops and for Native Americans to proceed with. What they want to do, and I found it true, is that Native Americans, Catholic Native Americans, they have their concerns and their issues, and they also know how their concerns and issues can be matched, can be addressed. They just need help. That's where they're looking for faith communities. That's where they're looking for leadership for the bishops, is to help them out, to develop and help with their own solutions to their own problems. So that's what we're doing with in terms of our Native American communities, especially in terms of our leadership. But the short answer is that it really depends. It really depends on faith communities. What we do with the crisis, what we do and how we can move it forward in terms of keep it on the public mind and public agenda when all the news media goes home, to make sure that we know clearly that racism is a problem, not only for the African Americans, but of course for the Native Americans as well.
I know the U.S. Conference just recently issued a statement about racism in America. Is that right?
Yeah, it's called Open Wide Our Hearts. And I was very privileged with Catholic Native American leaders and also with the bishops, is to help formulate the Native American part. And I'm very glad to say that actually the Native American part of the statement is more than the African American part. And that's done purposely, to say that racism is just not an African American problem, but deals especially with the Native Americans. And it is wide ranging. It deals with in terms of isolation, as we talked about earlier, but also unemployment. It goes to self-image. It affects all these different issues of what it means to be a Native American, Alaskan Native.
So this, in the context of the bishops, then this statement then would Open Wide Our Hearts would be distributed through local parishes, social service organizations. How does that work?
Yeah, one would hope so. One would hope so. Pastors would grab onto it and read it and then proclaim it to their congregations. I know a lot of pastors have, a lot of priests have, a lot of religious sisters and brothers have, and also we have a lot of great ways and areas that this can be formulated, not only for the parishes and the churches, but also through our Catholic Schools Network. We have great resources from the USCCB that will do that. And a lot of them, of course, are very specific to Native Americans. But it's my wish that, yes, that people read it, they understand it, and they also grab onto some of the material that's provided to instruct about it. But in terms of racism, bigotry, and all the other things that go into that, is a great resource for the Catholic Church, and also for other churches too, through our ecumenical officers and our office has grabbed onto it and made it their own too.
Wonderful. Azhar, do you think we're at a transition point? And if so, what lies ahead? Or if not, why not?
No, thank you so much for your question. I want to begin by saying that we are really blessed to live in a nation which has the largest economy in the world, the only superpower, and one of the greatest nations on earth. And the opportunities and possibilities that exist over here are humongous. Having said that, still we as a nation are facing some very serious challenges when it comes to wealth equality, when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to racial harmony. Unfortunately, we are seeing cases of racism and discrimination almost on a regular basis. If you look back in 1991, when we witnessed this Rodney King, beating, that case, and compare that with the murder of George Floyd, you will find that African American community have been the victims of racial injustice, and somehow racism has been institutionalized in our country. Even those individuals who are considered as progressive, inclusive, at different times they have used subtle language, non-racial language, to sideline minorities in this country, especially the African American community. I also want to share this very famous quote from an educator who is based out of Washington State. She's a female educator who once said, people who practice and preach racism forget that there is only one race, and that is human race. Haters are ignorant people, and they are taught to hate. No one is born with this quality. And she went on to say that anything you learn can be unlearned, especially bad habits when it comes to hate and bigotry. No genes, no pigment, no skin color, no particular religious faith has anything to do with your intellect or education. So we have to constantly work towards bringing this racial harmony. This is a very serious challenge. In the glorious Quran, God Almighty at one place in chapter number 3, verse number 104, he says, let there be a community among you, advocating what is good, demanding what is right, and eradicating what is wrong. These are indeed the successful. So we have to constantly, work towards bringing people closer to each other. There is a lot of polarization that we are seeing, and with the efforts of members of clergy from different faiths, I believe we can play a very important role. Definitely, we have come a long way, and at the same time, we still have a very long way to go.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and open the chat function. If any of you who are here with us today would like to pose a question or make a comment, please go ahead and do that in the chat function. And while you're doing so, I'd just like to ask both of our presenters, because you both have mentioned, either in the context of your remarks or before we started this program, that you're involved in alliances with individuals of other faiths but with whom you share a common cause in these troubled times. And tell us a little bit about the power of multi-faith alliances and why you think they might be especially important now. Either of you. I know you, Azhar, I know you've got plenty of those to tell us about.
I will let Reverend Carson go first, and then I'll follow.
Okay.
Yes, when we talk about our problems and difficulties, especially working with Native Americans, is just too large for any one group, one organization, even one faith to tackle. That we do reach out. We have in our USCCB, in our office, we have an entire department of ecumenical relations. We do reach out to other faiths, different denominations, in order to have a branch where we can solve our problems, both as a country, but also in the world. And in my own office, we also work out with different faiths in terms of concerns, especially working with the poor, working with both Navajo and Lakota and other different faith groups to help out with basic services through Catholic Charities and others to help out. So yeah, that would be my response.
So,
Azhar?
thank you
Yes.
so much, Reverend, for those remarks. I want to begin by this verse from the glorious Quran that is in chapter 5, where God Almighty commands us to help one another in righteousness and piety and do not help one another in sin and transgression. I am very blessed to work with interfaith and multi-faith groups. I can give you the example of this shoulder-to-shoulder campaign that came into existence almost a decade back, where close to 35 different religious denominations, they have come together to uphold American values and to stand up with American Muslims. This was an amazing initiative that has done wonderful work, which is a direct result of our collaboration with different faiths. At Islamic Relief, we have been partnering with Catholic Relief Services, with Bread for the World, with our friends from the Mormons community, with the evangelical, members, and we have, by the grace of God, made a good amount of progress. I'll give you a quick example, a story that was shared by one of the most respected and prominent Muslim leaders, Dr. Saeed Muhammad Saeed, who is the current president of the Islamic Society of North America. So, a few years back, he was traveling from Washington, D.C. To a different state to attend an interfaith, meeting. So it was a month of Ramadan, and it was, a month where Muslims are obligated to fast. But in the glorious Quran, in chapter number 2, verse number 184, there is an exception where God Almighty says, those who are fasting for a fixed number of days, if they are ill or on a journey, then the same number should be made up from these days. So you are exempted if you are sick or if you are a traveler. So he decided that he would skip that day and he will not fast because he's traveling and he's going to a different state. When he arrived over there, he was very warmly welcomed, but he found something very unusual. There was no snacks, there was no water, there was no, tea or coffee. So he asked his colleagues from the other faiths, where is the tea and coffee and where are the snacks? So they said, Dr. Saeed, to express our solidarity with you, all of us have decided to fast today. So that is the reason why there is no snacks or coffee or tea. So Dr. Saeed, he told us that he was very, uncomfortable, and he didn't wanted to share this with them, to tell them that he's not fasting because he didn't wanted to, disappoint all his friends from other faiths who were fasting, expressing their solidarity with him. So these are classic examples how far we have come together as different religious groups. There is amazing amount of collaboration and cooperation, and this opportunities and these possibilities can only happen here in America. I had the good fortune to travel to more than 35 countries around the world, and every time I come back to America, I feel like kneeling down and kissing the ground because we are very blessed to live in this great nation of ours, where there are so many opportunities and possibilities for us to collaborate and to serve not only our own communities, but society at large.
Thank you. We have a question. This is a tough question, and I know that that a number of denominations and houses of worship struggle with this, but Annie points out that historically, there has been silence from the church, she says, Christian or otherwise, in matters of social and racial justice. And she wonders, how can we overcome that historical silence? Reverend Carson, I know.
I can take a stab at that. The important thing is to learn, is to hear the stories. Especially in our Roman Catholic Church, we have what we call historical trauma with the Native Americans and Alaska Natives, not only with the federal government, but with Protestant and other denominations, also with the Catholic Church, especially with our boarding school period. And the object is to learn from that, learn and speak reconciliation, but to make sure that the stories can be told and that the bishops and others learn from these stories. So that's going to transform and direct our future behavior. That we can't undo the past for everybody who's had these historical traumas, but we can listen to the stories, understand them, feel for people, and then make sure that as we go forward, we keep the stories in mind to chart a course for not only for our Catholic Church, but also for other denominations too, to make sure that we do not redo the injustices and the problems of the past. But I think social justice in the Catholic Church is an ongoing thing. We have what's called the Catholic social justice teaching, and that evolves. We have teaching, but it evolves to different situations. So we can learn from that, and then any situation we come in and learn that we can learn from that, that enhances our Catholic social justice teaching, and then we go on from there. Well, the most important part, first most important part, especially in terms of Native Americans, Alaska Natives, is to listen to historic trauma, listen to the stories, because after you listen and understand, then only then you can go forward.
You mentioned restorative justice earlier, and that also is a starting point for restorative justice. Is it listening, deep listening?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that go into restorative justice. One of the most important parts of restorative justice is it was founded by the Native communities, because before Columbus and others, they didn't have jails. They had to deal with a situation within their communities. So if somebody disobeys the community laws, that they had to deal with it. So it's come together, and the first part is listening, not only to the perpetrator, but also to listen to the entire society and community, and also to the victim, and have that dialogue going back and forth. And after that dialogue, and then from that dialogue, going forth and doing something different. Restorative justice is always about transformation. It's not about maintaining the status quo, but it's always about doing something differently.
Azhar, would you like to comment on that, the historic silence?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm reminded of this very prophetic saying that was mentioned by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Man la yarham la yurham. Whoever does not show mercy shall receive no mercy. So it is sad that what we have been seeing, especially in the last few days, it is very heartbreaking. And I also want to say that I myself was very ignorant on this particular issue until I started attending some of the events during the Black History Month every year by visiting Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, visiting museums and looking at the dark past that we have witnessed as a nation. And since then, as I said earlier, we have come a long way, but still we have a long way to go. I believe that religious leaders and organizations that we all represent can address this issue, can do their part. But most importantly, I believe the elected officials, people who are holding important positions of power and influence, they have to show the courage to ensure that we remove all forms of hate, bigotry, racism, discrimination, because at the end of the day, when these social evils are removed, we as a nation will prosper, and we as a nation will, make a huge progress. These are things that are a big hindrance, and as the famous slogan goes, there can't be any peace if there is no justice. So justice has to be meted out to all those individuals who have been suffering, especially those who are victims of institutionalized racism in America. And it is not just the members of the African American community who should take a lead, but people of all backgrounds, all colors should speak up and should demand this from our elected officials to address this issue and to fix this issue and to end this virus of racism. So that's what I would very strongly say.
Thank you. I'm just going to comment, and I won't make this a question, although it was posed as a question, but as a comment. One of our participants says that the wonderful presentations and stories the two of you have told this afternoon really contradicts some of the negative messaging that we sometimes hear from the highest levels in our land about Native Americans and about Muslims. And so he's very appreciative of the opportunity of having heard these stories, and he hopes that you will find a way to get this message forward to the White House. So I'll just leave you with that. So we've come to the top of the hour, and it's been such a privilege to be with each of you for this 5-part series. I hope that we will stay in touch. You can contact us at any time by email at religion@freedomforum.org. We're glad to hear your comments and suggestions, questions. Also, we hope you'll visit our websites regularly, religiousfreedomcenter.org and freedomforum.org. You also, if you'd like to learn more about the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and Islamic Relief USA, they're easily accessible. I should have put your addresses here, but it's easy to find you on the web. You can also follow us on social media, and I've listed our handles here. I'd just like to close by saying thank you once again so much to our panelists. You just have been wonderful, given us wonderful information and inspiration this afternoon. I'd like to thank also the Arthur Davis Vinings Foundation, who's made it possible for us to sponsor this series. And then most of all, thank you to each and every one of you. I know that some of you have been with us for all 5 of our programs, and others of you for one or more, and we appreciate the involvement of each one of you. So thank you very much. Stay well. Take some time to ponder what we've learned this afternoon, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a delight to be with all of you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. God bless.